weren't accepted, I was going to ask side proposition whether they thought that rape was ever acceptable. And it seems to me that to be consistent, they must claim that not only is rape sometimes acceptable, but it becomes more acceptable the more the rapist enjoys it, and the less the victim suffers because he drugged her before he put her in the back of the car. What I want to do today is I want to talk to you about rights. I want to talk to you about the human good. I want to talk to you about why side proposition is trying to have their cake and eat it, where on the one hand they appeal to freedoms, they appeal to minority rights, but on the other hand they try to justify it with a framework by which we can subsume everything into happiness, even when it means that we have to explicitly override the very people they're trying to help. So first of all, before I go on to my main case, I'm going to deal with a couple of points of rebuttal. First of all, notice how First Government tried to hide what it is trying to prove behind several spurious claims. They pointed, for example, to the Haredim and said, in Israel, if we follow this policy, we're going to allow more public transport on Shabbat, right? The implication, the hidden assumption being there, that that's good because it's freedom. It will make more people happy. They never told us what happens if they end up becoming a majority, and they would be more happy if the minority seculars were all forced to become religious, right? Presumably they think that would be a good idea, radically reducing those people's autonomy because the prejudices of the minority, because the prejudices of the majority override them. They tried to decline that we're going to be taking away these spurious vetoes by putting it in a language of protecting freedom. Don't accept that, don't buy into that. They're talking about allowing the bullies who form a majority in the playground to bully the small little fat kid in the corner. And then moving over onto side opposition. They started off by telling us, they started off by telling us that we're going to be helping the people at the bottom. They never explained to us why there is a necessary connection between abolishing any concept of rights and appealing to maximum utility and helping the people at the bottom. Especially when you can maximize utility by exploiting the people at the bottom. So even though they said, we're never going to end up exploiting the people at the bottom and the minorities because we care for them and diminishing utility, which they never really explained. They didn't tell us why, if we have a situation where we can violently abuse someone just because it will make someone happy, we can't do that. At one point, they seem to be saying, yeah, that's a good idea, we should do it. On the other hand, said, no, that won't happen anyway. And then in their extension, which was basically a clarification or a reinvention of the model, they told us, look, we can measure happiness because there's the happiness index. Some bureaucrat somewhere has come up with a measure. No indication of why that's a good measure. Why the fact that someone has come up with this measure means that it's intellectually coherent. So we don't buy into that. We don't buy into their claims you can protect autonomy within the very confused and incoherent model that they've presented. So what am I going to do? I'm going to move on to present 2 points. One is how the utilitarianism that they are suggesting is essentially self-defeating, it contradicts itself, and then I'm going to move on to talk about other conceptions of the good and why this foiled that decline. So there are basically 2 reasons why we might think that utilitarianism is the right approach to take. They didn't present either of them, so I'm going to try to clarify. One, we think that happiness in general is an intrinsic and unconditional good. If that is the case, that happiness is the only thing we care about, then we would take into account animals, we would take into account foreigners, even if that means completely stripping our country of all its wealth for the sake of other countries. They didn't say that. In fact, they flat out denied that. So what I'm going to go on is I'm going to say that they don't actually think that happiness is some unconditional intrinsic good. Instead, they think it comes down to something to do with rights. I'm going to present this as what it's actually about. I'm going to say that utilitarianism is grounded in an idea of rights, an idea they're riding roughshod over because their account of utilitarianism was intellectually bankrupt. Decline. Utilitarianism draws a powerful appeal from the idea of basic human equality. That all of our preferences are to be counted once and only once, and that none of us should count for more than one. That's the intuitive appeal behind the greatest happiness for the greatest number, that we're going to count each person once. They've conflated that decline with greatest happiness. Let me tell you what that means. It means that when someone is prejudiced, and he has a preference not only over his own activity, but the activity of other people, you get to count him twice. If someone gets offended just because you're doing something they don't like reading pornography or whatever, we're going to take their preferences into account over what you do as well as over what they do. In that sense, decline, you empower people who are prejudiced against people who are trying to get on with what we think a valuable human life consists of. Not pornography, that was a bad example. Instead, autonomy, freedom, liberty, the ability ability to control your own life decline. So under my model that I think about utilitarianism, this directly entails rights. It entails that we should create a special sphere of autonomy around each person, that we need to protect their ability to get on with their own lives by themselves. Side proposition, I'm still not clear. If they want to clarify it in the summary, let them do so. Still not clear whether they believe we have rights or whether we just get rid of them and say we'll plug it into the happiness index and see what pops out of that. I'll close it.
So we don't double count people under our model because the government is an objective actor. Under your model of democracy, some people have more power than others. Isn't that a problem?
No, because under your model, even if the government is an objective actor, and it notices that a large number of people are going to be horribly offended by having 3 black people in their village, they're going to evict the 3 black people on the knowledge that it's going to upset more people and there'll be more anguish overall having those people in the village just because they are extremely offended. We don't like that. We like rights. We think rights actually come, if either rights are independent of utilitarianism, side with us, or they come from utilitarianism, in which case this is just intellectually incoherent and it falls on its own non-merits. But let me move on and talk about my second case, which is about how it ignores other conceptions of the human being, because I presume side proposition doesn't agree with the idea that we should plug everyone in this audience or inject them with a serum that's going to put them into a coma, but give them an immensely happy state of mind. If they want to produce that in summary, let them do so. I don't think that's what they're going for. And the reason that we wouldn't agree to have ourselves plugged into a machine that's going to give us endless happiness and give us a virtual reality life is that we think there is something valuable in making our own choices. There is something intrinsically valuable about autonomy. It is incredibly facile to say that the only thing that matters is happiness. And if it so happens, and this is really important, if it so happens that logically the way you produce the most happiness is by kidnapping everyone, plugging them into a machine that is going to produce the greatest happiness, however you want to mention it, then they are rationally compelled to accept that they will do that. That gets rid of all the idea of autonomy, it gets rid of the idea that there is something valuable in life about learning from your experiences, about making choices of your own, about being essentially human. It ignores the idea that there's such value in heroism, in justice, in desert, because it says that the only thing that matters is this one facile, simple property. So ladies and gentlemen, because we believe in rights, because if you believe in utilitarianism, you should believe in rights anyway. Incredibly proud to stand on this side. Thank you.